philosophies find a way to merge their talents and create stunning vistas in Atlanta, Georgia. The story of the garden and the Gardners, next on A Gardener's Diary.
I found a garden in my hometown that had surprises around every corner. It belongs to Caroline and Daryl Riggins. Like most couples that garden together, they have different opinions about what their garden should be.
I was really wanting to have a large vegetable garden. I didn't really think that we were going to just fill the whole yard up with cultivated plants.
Sometimes we have our conflicts in the garden, but we work it out, and it's just part of the fun of gardening.
Your garden, for the most part, is pretty flat, like lots of Georgia, although we do have hills, but all of a sudden you have this giant hill. When I discovered this hill, I thought, where did this come from? But it really looks as if it's always been here.
Well, actually, Erica, this was pretty much an accident. I started a long time ago, probably 20 years ago, piling old waste from the yard. A lot of times we dig up mud and replace with better soil, this kind of thing. So all of that was piled in here, and we decided to plant it.
What a good decision, because you've got almost like a little mountain here.
We call it Compost Mountain.
Yeah.
Compost mountain.
Compost mountain.
Everybody needs a compost mountain.
Well,
Right.
it's full of all kinds of organic material as well as the mud. It has some of the best soil really in the whole garden.
Did he have to twist your arm to keep Compost Mountain?
Once he said, let's plant it, I said, okay. Perfect.
Caroline's always looking for a place to put
Right.
some
More plants.
little touches
Right.
or more plants.
Daryl started by throwing just fescue seed over the whole thing, and it grew up and looked like ornamental grass. And then he threw in what I call mundanes, which
Mundanes?
are mundanes. Those are the straight green hosta, I think ventricosa. We have lots of them, so he just,
Those are my nice favorite hostas I had in pots that had gotten real big and pretty.
they bloom beautifully, but they're just kind of boring the rest of the year. But we had fescue and mundanes to start with, and then slowly we replaced them with more fun things.
I never knew, Caroline, why you don't really like mundanes.
I like them. I just don't like
Okay.
so many of them.
Okay.
Well, mundane for her is not mundane for you. You and Caroline have been gardening together for 20 years at least. Did you meet gardening? How did you meet?
We were both studying horticulture at the University of Georgia back in 1974.
A few years ago.
Yeah, a few years ago.
When I first met Daryl, I didn't like his shoes. He had the ugliest saddle oxfords. They were that red and tan color.
I thought they were nice shoes, but they may have been the wrong color, I'm not sure.
It just turned me off, so I said, I don't want to meet this man.
I kept them over from maybe too long because I don't like throwing things away, and maybe they were not the shoes that other people were wearing at the time. I also had some red and green plaid pants that probably were not real impressive either, but at one time they went with the shoes real well.
So you've changed your style
I've
today.
tried, and but I don't think that was the real reason. We just didn't we didn't talk long enough, I think, was what it was.
Daryl and I had mutual friends at the University of Georgia who kept saying we really should get together. We had common interests.
We met again in November, and that time it seemed like it was going to be a better relationship.
Somehow he spiffed up his clothing act and his shoes, and the next meeting went a lot better.
We started, I guess you call it dating, and next thing you know, we were having a garden together, and
Within 6 months, we were married. So we've been gardening together ever since.
You're right on a busy street in Atlanta, but it's pretty quiet for the most part. You have a lot of traffic, but it's certainly lush and green, and you wouldn't know you were on a busy street.
Yes, we've always tried to plant as many magnolias and shrubs and perennials as
Look at
possible.
those magnolias. Those are huge.
They were here when we moved here, and we added some. When we planted those magnolia seeds, they came from my father's home place in Alabama. And of course, I didn't think we would be here long enough to see them grow to any size. This was our starter house. We're here 22 years later.
Well, this is not a starter garden. This is a mature, beautiful, lush garden. And that Clematis armandii, I just have to comment, it's almost like a drape.
Well, we started it on the post, and of course it's such a rampant grower. We said, well, let's give it some room to run, and then we just kept running the wire down the house, and I think by the end of this year it will reach the end of the wire.
Now, you're both gardeners, so who thought of putting the Clematis up there?
most likely Caroline.
This beautiful little thalictrum with the hosta and that hardy geranium.
I love this combination. It's just wonderful little contrast of textures and colors. The gold hosta, the carmina geranium. This is a dwarf thalictrum. The little lavender flowers go well with this dianthus.
That thalictrum, that has such pretty foliage, it reminds me a little bit of a columbine. How long will that bloom for you in that spot, you think?
Several weeks, and it seems to be fairly tough. Last summer during the drought, I thought I had lost it because it pretty much disappeared, but it popped right back this spring. I was real glad to see it.
So it's a hardy perennial, and it's a spring bloomer, and then the rest of the season it has just that pretty foliage.
It's that pretty dainty foliage. It's a nice contrast to the other plants in the area.
Well, another tough plant right here, this Itea, is this Henry's garnet?
It is.
Itea virginica Henry's garnet. I have seen this growing in a bald cypress swamp right on the banks of the river. Of course, it was not this beautiful.
If cultivated, it probably does better. And amazingly, this is very dry soil because of the maple tree roots, and it's just a dry area, and it's surviving just as well as the ones we have in moist areas.
Virginia sweetspire. It's a
a nice
beautiful
plant.
plant, and then you get the bonus of the great fall color
Yes.
come autumn. Who designed this area?
I'm not sure. I planted this area, but it didn't look exactly like this. I think Caroline's come back in and rearranged some things. Well, when we first moved here, it was really a parking lot. People used to park the cars, and it was sort of a mud pit, and it's real hard with a lot of gravel underneath, so it was a challenge at first.
We have pictures that shows this is lawn. In fact, we forget sometimes how much lawn we did used to have. We planted these maples as very small trees, and they shaded out the lawn, so the grass became so pitiful we had to get rid of it.
Hard to believe it was ever a mud pit when
It
you look
was.
at it now.
Coming up, how to grow vegetables in the middle of your driveway.
When I visited Caroline and Daryl's garden in Atlanta, Georgia, I could hardly believe it was just over an acre. Daryl had structured parts of the garden into rooms, which Caroline filled with beautiful plant combinations. One of my favorite spots was a secret garden filled with roses. Caroline, this is just like Alice in Wonderland, walking through this arch of Leyland cypress,
Yes.
great use for that plant there, into this room of roses. This is magical.
This is one of my favorite views in the garden. And we were lucky to get this. We didn't have this much sun for roses until a huge tree fell a few years ago. It actually tore into our house, but it opened up the sky and allowed enough sunshine for roses.
And you've mounded the bed up so that gives you a good way to view the roses.
Plus it gives you excellent drainage, and we really built the soil up to be rich. We mixed in perennials so that as the roses come and go, there's something blooming just about all the time.
And then the views off to the left, and they're just incredible.
We have a lot of little paths that just interconnect the garden.
If you're going to grow roses, I think this is a way to grow them. Just giving them lots of room, and they don't look like they're being contained. They can do what they want to do. And the conifers really provide a beautiful backdrop and help break up the space without, I don't feel closed in. So the theme in this garden is roses.
This is the rose walk, yes.
And the bottle tree, is that a southern thing?
Very southern, yes.
So it's right at home here in Georgia. And how did you decide to place it there?
I don't remember. It just seemed like a logical place to put a bottle tree.
And I like the ivy. That adds a nice little...
And that just happened. You know, we had ivy under the Japanese maple, and we liked the way it looked, so we left it.
The way you've juxtaposed the pink against the burgundy of the Japanese maple.
And this rose here ties in that wonderful
Oh.
burgundy color, too.
What rose is that?
That's Basie's purple. It has rugosa in the blood. You can tell it has very bad thorny stems. So that has rugosa in the bloodline somewhere, if roses have blood.
If roses have blood.
They draw blood.
And what rose is that?
Excellence von Schubert.
Oh.
It's an antique rose. It absolutely is a wonderful performer, and it just keeps coming.
And the clean foliage, too.
Very clean
Doesn't-
foliage. This is its first flush. It's about to finish, but there's a new flush coming on. It just sprawls, and it's just a wonderful rose.
Do you prune that much?
I pruned it more heavily a winter ago, and it stayed tighter. This year I thought I'd just let it, prune it gently, and it's responding by really sprawling.
Really, one branch makes a bouquet.
Makes a bouquet.
So this is a one branch bouquet.
Absolutely.
All these in this area are full sun roses.
Yes, even this is not considered full sun by rose standards.
Rose standards are what, 6 hours?
I think so.
Yeah. And another path here.
Yes, this ties into the path that goes to the further back into the garden.
This is an elegant weeping cherry.
Yes.
It makes this big, beautiful veil over this part of the garden. And right over here, this beech tree, that's going to be shading this beautiful water garden.
Daryl put this beech tree here first. He dug it up and it was sitting there balled in burlap, and eventually it just grew into the earth, and then we built the bog around it.
I just got it, the beach.
I was
The
wondering
beach under the beech tree. No, that's pretty good with all the shells. My mind was a little slow in picking that up.
Actually, we knew we could count on you to
You're
catch that.
the first person who's
It
picked up on
slips
it.
by a lot of
Come
people.
on.
Oh, yeah.
And you do have bog plants here. I see the little pitcher plants.
Yeah, this is the little Sarracenia bed.
And the Acorus, that's a tough plant.
It is. It can grow in standing water, and it can grow in just regular garden soil. And that is literally in the water.
Right
The
in
roots
the
are
water.
in there.
Who designed this?
Well,
I
we
guess
worked
together?
on it together, but
I
I'm
don't
sure
know.
Caroline designed it because she had a heart set on having a bog.
Well, it has a very natural feel, and especially the way you've used the rocks.
Daryl is a wonderful gardening partner because he's as enthusiastic as I am. He is a real bulldog in the garden. He can work really hard. He can move any rock, any wheelbarrow full of stuff.
She's so good at organizing and arranging plants with their textures and colors because with me, almost any color goes.
He tends to focus on collections. He likes to collect Japanese maples or collect native azaleas or collect big leaf things. Whereas my focus tends to be more putting it all together in the space. It's just fun because we both appreciate what both of us have done, and we like to walk every day through the garden and see what has grown and what's doing well. It's just a joyous thing to share.
This Japanese maple collection is so elegant. And this cultivar, I know it's an Acer palmatum dissectum, but do you know the cultivar?
Yeah, this one is red filigree, and the leaf is the
Beautiful.
tiniest, most dainty leaf that I've seen.
Very
And
much
it's-
like lace.
Oh yeah, it's probably at least 15 years old.
15 years
At
in
least,
this pot?
at least. Mhm.
Wow.
And it came this big bare root mail order and has just been very slow, very elegant.
And I bet even in the winter, the silhouette is
The
beautiful.
silhouette's fantastic, and it gets just really intense red coloration in the fall.
There's so many beautiful Japanese maples, but I like the fact that this one stays small.
We love it.
I have to say, this is the most unusual vegetable garden I've ever seen. They're not fancy containers, but you're growing this vegetable garden in these big pots.
We've reclaimed part of the driveway. It's too hard to garden in, so the pots work great. And
Perfect.
the black pots actually warm up earlier in the spring, rather, so the soil's warm and we can grow crops like lettuce and beets and carrots sooner than we can in the garden.
But what a great way for people with limited space and a driveway and hard ground.
Exactly.
Good idea.
It's perfect.
The driveway garden.
Yes.
Coming up, Daryl and Caroline compete for some prime real estate in the sunniest part of the garden.
While touring Daryl and Caroline Riggins' Georgia garden, I could see the creative way they deal with their different gardening styles. A wooden corral hides Daryl's area, where he propagates and rejuvenates sickly plants. But the rest of the garden is bursting with Caroline's vibrant plant combinations. This begonia is stunning, and it's in a container. It's not a hardy plant, but you've stuck it right in the middle of the garden with all these other hardy perennials.
This is called silver maple begonia. And the colors play really well off the other silvers and burgundies that are in this garden.
So did you have a bare spot and you decided to just put that pot right
Yes.
there?
I think it looks better to sometimes have a container with a plant in it than to have the plant in the ground. I don't know what it is, but maybe it's the elevation or
Shows it off.
it shows it off.
Again, this is sort of mostly shade, or
It's a very bright shade, a little bit of sunshine in the middle of the day. But we have the white Lychnis.
that's a bright color, brightens up a shady spot.
I believe it handles more shade than the magenta one.
And the oxalis is so pretty with the bellflower, that campanula. And that's a hardy perennial.
Yes, that's a new variety called Blue Waterfall.
Oof.
Yeah, I love the silver and the blue and the purple together. And then just plain old green just looks really nice against that rich color.
And then a more classically familiar plant to a lot of people, caladium, but that particular variety has that beautiful, it's almost like a wash.
I love Aran. It can take full sun or full shade, either one. It's not a real showy color. It plays on all these whites and burgundies, and greens.
Everywhere I turn my head, there's so much to see in this garden. With all the plants you have in the ground, you still have lots of wonderful plants in containers like these figs. Are there plans for these?
Well, I like to give some to friends every now and then, and I like rooting plants. It's just something that I feel accomplished when I root some plants.
So you propagate your plants as well as grow them in the ground?
Right. I consider myself more of a plant grower than a gardener. I like all kind of plants. I'll hang on to dying plants that should be thrown away, and I have a tendency to want to pot them up and fertilize them and baby them a little, and sometimes it maybe creates some unattractiveness. And I have one special area in the yard that not many people get to see that we call the corral. It's really a four-sided fence, wood fence area about 6 feet tall. I can put my bad mess in there and maybe get away with keeping some of the more attractive mess out in the yard for people to see. This was an old driveway that came back to an old house, and I didn't want to just plant it and block a driveway. You know, sometimes people just don't want to do that. And
Was this
so,
whole place a driveway?
This whole, yeah, just about. And I felt like if I kept them in pots, then I can consider them temporary, and if I ever want to have my driveway back, I would get a bulldozer or a bobcat to move some of the things. But
This is so beautiful here, this vegetable garden, and you guys eat a lot of vegetables. Did you just tell Caroline I'm going to have a vegetable garden right here? Did you all discuss it, or what happens in the planning process with Daryl and Caroline?
well, things just get worked out. Little bit by little bit, I've been rooted out of my vegetable gardening area, so I decided, well, if I'm gonna have one, I better take advantage of this little sunshine spot down here. With Caroline starting to get a few plants on the edge here.
She's creeping into your vegetable territory.
Yeah, creeping in.
So you start out the gardens, and then what happens? She takes them over?
She's real diplomatic,
Sneaky?
diplomatic. She does ask, but you know, it's hard to say no when she says, I have some pretty flowers I'd like to plant.
Coming up, the best anniversary gift is one you don't have to wrap.
Found Daryl and Caroline Riggins' Atlanta garden to be truly a labor of love. And nowhere is that more evident than in the anniversary garden, where the entrance is highlighted by a bright carpet of sedum in flower. Caroline, this sedum is just spectacular with the yellow flowers, but even without the flowers, I love it.
It is not real rampant grower, but it does spread readily. Another name for it is copper penny sedum, because in the fall and winter it has this wonderful bronzy color.
Sedum tractinum, is that right?
Tractinum.
That's such a mouthful.
It is.
And do you propagate it yourself to share with people? Because I know you can just literally stick a piece on the ground and cover it up, and that's an easy way to propagate it.
It's very easy to propagate. If I need to spread it around the garden, I just lift a hunk of it because it's rooted where it touches down, and just move it around, which I have done.
And this is evergreen, it's hardy.
It's evergreen. The blooms are not real flashy, but it's just a nice yellow effect. I've heard it handles a lot of shade and all kinds of different soil conditions, so it's really a very good sedum.
And it really is a great carpet under this boxwood that's for this garden that's a little bit more formal than the rest of your garden.
Yes, this is the anniversary garden, or the lower garden. Daryl actually terraced it, and he played off the circle lawn and did a half circle design down here.
And that was your anniversary present?
Uh-huh. Yeah, and he built it in probably the hottest day of summer, but he just laid out this wonderful garden and prepared the soil beautifully and just laid the stage for these plants.
Beautiful present.
I truly believe just seeing something grow gives me the biggest pleasure. You can watch little plants grow up and remember through the years what it looked like from before, and that's something that pleases me.
It's almost a spiritual experience to be in the garden and to smell the air and see things growing, and it's just a joy. It's just a connection to the earth.